I think it's safe to say that traditional wagons or compact ones aren't all that common to see on the roads in 2024. To my surprise and maybe yours, just 20 years ago, there were over 30 different wagons for consumers to pick from. This was a super competitive segment that I honestly totally forgot about. It feels like these early to mid-2000s wagons fell off the face of the earth, they just aren't around anymore. It wasn't just the Euro market that was competitive in this segment. In present time, that seems to be the case with Volvo, Mercedes, and Audi still having wagons for sale. Back in the 2000s, the domestic and Asian markets were both heavily involved. With the introduction of the minivan in the early 80s, consumers started picking them over the wagon. This would continue into the 90s, and of course, this is when SUVs started gaining popularity. However, the station wagon was still holding on for dear life in the 2000s. As I said earlier, there were over 30 different options to pick from. Now, were they popular? Not really. By the 2000s, SUVs, minivans, and as of recent, crossovers completely took over. When I say this, I'm coming from an American perspective. I'm sure it's a different story across the pond, as wagons were and are far more popular. Each of these wagons were good at their own thing. Maybe it was performance, fuel economy, comfort, or affordability. We are going to find out together. Because there are so many to talk about, I can really only briefly mention a few things about each one. If you have a short attention span like me, then that's a good thing. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy an entire video dedicated to the wagons of the early 2000s. The first 3 generations of the Taurus had a wagon available, so it only made sense to continue what the first gen started. These 4th gen wagons ran from 2000 until 2005 and were okay for the time. 3rd generation Subaru Legacy wagon. These ran from 1999 until 2004. 2.5 liter flat 4, good for 165 horsepower, with all-wheel drive, and standard a 5-speed manual. I do like these a lot. Mercedes C320 wagon. These could be had with a 3.2 liter V6 that made 215 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque with all-wheel drive. More common though was the C240, which came with a 4-cylinder. These ran from 2001 until 2005 here in the States. For the 2000 model year, Saturn introduced the L series to their lineup. LS meant sedan and LW meant wagon. The LW200 came with a 4-cylinder, was good on gas, and was affordable. The LW300 came standard with a V6 that was designed by Opel, good for 181 horses, and was a little more upscale. Even in the 2000s, these Saturn wagons weren't popular, they were just better options to pick from. Before the L series of wagons, there was the S series. These were introduced in the 90s, and I feel, at least compared to the rest, they are a little outdated. However, these had that classic Saturn character to them that the later models never had. Suzuki Esteem. These were offered in the States from 1998 until 2002. They were intended to compete with the affordable wagons of the time with a base MSRP of $14,000 back in 2000. I can't recall ever seeing these on the road, maybe you have. Audi A6 Avant. Introduced in 2001 and lasting until 2004 as direct competition to the 5 Series and E-Class. Most of these came with all-wheel drive and a peppy 3-liter turbo. Across these, there was the RS6 Avant with a twin-turbo V8 that made over 440 horsepower in a family wagon. Mitsubishi Lancer Sportback. These were only offered in the States for one model year, 2004. I never knew that this generation wagon was even offered over here. It definitely looks bizarre compared to the others on this list. There was even a Rally Art trim offered which gave it 2 more horsepower over base models. What's a wagon video without Volvo? The 2nd gen V70 was introduced in 2000 and lasted until 2007. There's the regular V70 which was catered towards most, then the V70 XC or XC70 which came standard with all-wheel drive and raised suspension, and lastly the V70R which was a monster at the time with close to 300 horsepower. The baby brother to the Taurus, the Focus, had a wagon in its lineup as well. The Focus wagon wasn't anything crazy, but they were practical and affordable for many families. That of itself is very important for some. These were available from 2000 to 2007, and while 2007 wasn't that far ago, President Bush at the time was still in office. The Saab 9.5 wagon was introduced in 1998 and lasted until 2010, which is on the longer side for a single generation, but these underwent lots of changes both in and out. I mean, look at the difference between an 02 and an 08 model. I think these were on the same platform as those Saturn L wagons that I mentioned earlier, but I'm not 100% sure. I like these wagons, especially the Aero 9.5s, as they came with a 5-speed manual and 230 horses. 2005 to 2008 Jaguar X-Type Sportwagon. These are super rare to find as only 1,600 of them sold over that 4-year run. The regular X-Type was fairly popular, these not so much. Under the hood was a 3-liter V6 good for 226 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds. The Mercury Sable also came in a wagon configuration. Mercury being the sister brand of Ford, these Sables were slightly more upscale compared to the Tauruses. Suzuki Forenza Wagon. Who would have thought that another Suzuki would make this video? The Forenza was introduced in 2004 with the wagon model coming out 1 year later. This car was the product of Suzuki's partnership with Daewoo and GM that fizzled out quickly as these were discontinued just a few years later. BMW E46 or 3 Series Wagon. These were offered from 2001 until 2005. Many people like this body style from BMW. Personally, I do too. It's aged very well. A 325i wagon with that straight 6 and 5-speed manual is one of the best combinations on this list. Mazda Protégé 5. This sporty wagon from Mazda was only offered from 2002 to 2003. They came standard with a 5-speed manual and a 2-liter good for 130 horsepower. 130 isn't a whole lot given who this car was intended for, but from what I've read from owners, they say it handles great and it's really fun to drive. Volvo V40 offered from 1995 until 2004. I have to say, I'm not really a fan of these. I think there were better options for the price. 2-liter turbo and all-wheel drive are good aspects of this car, but a lot of the other wagons shared those same attributes. Subaru Impreza Wagon, offered from 2001 until 2007. These to me are far better than those V40s. All-wheel drive, 5-speed manual, 2-liter turbo, and all the room you need. While we are on this platform, I'll just go ahead and mention the Subaru, or Saab 92X. Only around 10,000 of these were made from 2005 to 2006. They're super rare to come across. I really like these too, especially the arrows. Audi A4 Avant made from 2001 until 2004. Under the hood was either a 1.8-liter turbo or a 3-liter V6 good for 220 horsepower. If you didn't need all the room that the A6 provided, well, this was the alternative. I would rather buy our next entry, which is the Volkswagen Jetta wagon. These were offered at around the same time and were simply more affordable. Recently, a 2003 with the 5-speed manual, 1.9 turbo diesel, and 120,000 miles sold for more than $15,000 on Bring a Trailer. I heard these TDI wagons are pretty reliable and they get something like 50 miles per gallon. BMW E39 or 5 Series Wagon. These were offered from 1997 until 2003. Even the 5th gen 5 Series wagons could make this list as they came out 1 year later. I don't believe the States got the 545i with that 340 horsepower V8, but the 530i's are still good. Daewoo Nubira. In the States, these were introduced in 2000 and lasted until 2002. They were replaced by the Suzuki Forenza that I mentioned earlier. It's crazy to think how at the beginning of 2000, there were more than 200 Daewoo dealerships. 2 years later, they went bankrupt. These wagons are pretty forgettable. I honestly had no idea they existed, but they were affordable and they came with a GM 2-liter 4-cylinder. Mazda 6 Sportwagon. These were only available for 2004 and 2005. There was no speed version for this wagon, but they all came factory with a punchy 220 horsepower V6 and standard with a 5-speed manual. I think these look great and they are very hard to come by these days as less than 7,000 were produced. Volvo V50. These replaced the V40 back in 2004. The T5s were pretty cool with that 2.5-liter turbo 4 making close to 220 horsepower. You could also option for all-wheel drive with these. Definitely not the best, but certainly not the worst on this list. Lexus IS300 Sportwagon. This was the only wagon Lexus has ever sold and they are super rare. They were offered from 2002 until 2005 with a little over 3,000 units sold. These came with rear-wheel drive and a very smooth inline-6 making 215 horsepower. These IS300s have similar engines to the Mark IV Supra. With that said, these can take on a lot of power. The last American wagon on this list goes to the Malibu Maxx. These were offered from 2004 until 2007. I was a little hesitant to put this in the video. Some people say it's a hatchback or liftback and others say it's a wagon. There is a window behind the D-pillar and it has 4 doors, which are characteristics of a wagon. I think it depends on who you ask. Mercedes E-Class Estate or Wagon. These were built from 2004 until 2009. The E500 was Mercedes' first V8 E-Wagon with over 300 horses and all-wheel drive. These second gens could also be on this list as they ended production in 2003. Kia Rio Cinco. These were only offered from 2003 to 2005. Kind of the same story with the Malibu Maxx. Does it meet the technical requirements of a wagon? Maybe, maybe not. These Kia Rios were absolute garbage anyway, so let's just keep moving forward. Volkswagen Passat wagon. These were offered from 1999 until 2005. You want more room than the Jetta and don't want to pay for an A6? Well, this was for you. For 2004, these had the W8 engine in them, which made over 270 horsepower, and some even came with a 6-speed manual transmission. Hyundai Elantra wagon. These were introduced in 96 and lasted until 2000. Personally, this might be one of the worst ones in this video. They were designed in the mid-90s, so it's not really fair, but still nothing really crazy about these. However, they were affordable and decent on gas, so it does excel in those departments. I said the Malibu Maxx was the last American entry, but I forgot one more. The Dodge Magnum, produced from 2005 until 2008. I'll still see these occasionally on the road, but never have I seen an SRT8 in person. The Dodge Magnum is one of those cars where you either love it or you hate it. I actually love the styling of these, and I think those SRT8s will probably be worth something in the future. Honorable mention goes to the Acura TSX Sportwagon. That generation TSX came out in 2009, but the wagon was introduced 2 years later. And there you have it, an entire video dedicated to the wagons of the 2000s. I counted 32 entries in this video, which goes to show how popular this segment really was. Now, I'm not a car expert, so there's going to be some that I missed. It always happens, and I'm ready to read your comments. I feel like I did a pretty good job, but you never know. If you're a regular viewer and you made it to this point, I appreciate you watching a more modern car video. Next week's video will probably take place in the 70s, so if that's more your style, be sure to check that out. That is going to wrap it up for this week's video. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will try to see you all next week.